You are listening to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all the latest news, Overwatch League results, and mishaps in Overwatch. Here are your hosts, Totemly Drunk and Edinar.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 208, we're going to take a good amount of time to basically sit down and reflect on the state of everything in regards to the game, its competitive scene, and honestly just this disconnect that we've kind of had here that has been building up over the course of, honestly, like, several weeks at this point. Now, a lot of that is just due to the fact that, there's been some pretty major news here as of late, whether it is departures from the Path to Pro when it comes to the Academy teams, to constant shuffling in regards to the Overwatch League formats, to the reigning MVP, deciding to retire mid-season to pursue a career in Valorant, to hero pools constantly, leaving certain players kind of, out in the dark in a lot of situations, so a lot to kind of, unpack here, given the circumstances. But before we get into all of that and introduce you to my co-host, let me just quickly take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So as you can tell, it is Edinar and myself again here tonight, and Ed, a lot has been said within, I would say, the past 30-ish hours at this point, given the Sinatra news. So, outside of that, though, how's your week been treating you?
Shitty. All right, not horrible, but I've had, I've had some computer issues, which are fixed now, but fixed now after spending money, which is never fun. But it needed to be done. It just sucks when you have to invest money into something and you just bought a condo. So it's not like you have a bunch of, money just laying around. So, other than that, it was a lot of fun. We had our first ever dropping spicy Apex tournament this past weekend. Which Spider and myself and another one of my listeners over there, Saizon, teamed up, and we knew we weren't going to win. We were not going to win.
What do you mean?
But we finished dead center in the middle. I think we finished 8th out of 16. So we were happy about that because we all actually played amazing. We came down to it and we won 3 of our last 4 matches. So it was a lot of fun. So that was great. But yeah, this whole computer, you needing a new router and troubleshooting all that stuff kind of sucks. But how's your week been?
Pretty busy, doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff for the upcoming podcast project that is launching this week. Completely not Overwatch related, so insert your shocked Pikachu memes here. So doing a lot of stuff there. I commissioned a friend to do an illustration for us, so I can use that for our iTunes artwork, which will be pretty interesting. I'm anxious to see how that's gonna work out. I don't know if that will be ready for when I'm going to submit for the podcatchers right away, so I'm kind of keeping an eye on that. But we got an awesome synthwave track that we had made, and I just gotta cut that down a little bit. But I'm really looking forward to jumping in and just talking about something I'm very passionate about outside of gaming. So should be a really good time, and it's a topic I talk about every week anyway, just not on a podcast at this point.
Like, how me and you did not start a movie podcast before you made this one is beyond me.
Mm-hmm. I think part of it is just the fact that it's more
you already do enough shows with me.
that and the fact that it's honestly kind of hard to like hone in on a format for like a movie-based podcast. That's really the other major component to that. I mean, I wouldn't completely rule it out, but we're not here to talk about other podcasts. We're here to talk about the overall state of the game as well as the competitive side. So let's get the big news a bit out of the way right out of the gate here, and that is the fact that Sinatraa has retired from Overwatch and is moving to Valorant to pursue other opportunities. Now, this came as a surprise to some people. This is someone who was on the Championship Shock roster. He is the reigning Overwatch League MVP. And of course, the Shock ended up winning that against the Vancouver Titans this past season. So basically, this announcement came after a report from ESPN Esports that, he's kind of like jumping ship. And they reported that he is going to sign with Sentinels, which were an organization that had previously owned the Los Angeles Gladiators. That is no longer the case because of, stuff that happened therein. I can't remember if that was, like, towards the start of the season or if that was during the off-season. But anyways, you had someone like Sinatraa who was, at the time, like, one of the younger players to sign with an Overwatch League team. Because they did sign with the Shock when he was 17 years old. And, he had an awesome showing in the World Cup that year. There was a lot of rumors about, like, how much money he was getting signed for, and that's where that, like, Mr. 150K nickname kind of sparked from. And then he wasn't really eligible to play until he turned 18, which was kind of, like, midway through the first season. Now, obviously, that first season, Sinatraa was just okay. A lot more was done in his sophomore year as an Overwatch League pro. And, maybe that was a little magnified by the fact that he got to play Zarya for 3/4 of the year, since it was, the 3-3 meta at the time. But there's been a lot of narratives kind of like it being thrown around before we really heard from Sinatraa himself over basically the reasoning behind the move. What he was having to say about the state of the game. He also like signed off, given like a paragraph for like all of his teammates except for like Super, who he was just trolling because he's a 5-head. So I wanted to bring up what Sinatraa said, and we'll kind of like go from there. So Sinatraa said that straight up, he just lost his passion for the game. He says that he didn't know what the real killer was for him, but it was probably the 2-2-2 role lock. And he also mentioned the hero bans, but he wasn't sure. He mentioned that it was hard for him to log on to play, and he didn't find the game fun in scrims or in ranked at all anymore at that point. So this was not a decision that was made in one day. This was something that had been going on for like really the entirety of the month, non-stop thinking every day and sleepless nights. And it just seemed to stress him out to the point where, he just felt like it was time for him to do what was best for him. And he's pursuing a career in Valorant. So, it seemed like he was still trying, but, like, obviously the team could really tell, like, he was kind of checking himself out. And I've seen a lot of people that were just like, well, he wasn't really going to get played. And Super outright completely squashed that during a stream yesterday, because Sinatra was never going to get like permabench or anything like that. We don't know like who would have been, say, like their Echo player on the team, but Sinatra was still part of the DPS rotation. And I really dislike this narrative that's been thrown around by some of the community in regards to like the MVP status. Like, we have people that are going around being like, "Oh, well, like what else does Sinatra have to prove?" And we watch a ton of sports. I can't really recall an instance where an MVP was like, "You know what? Once was enough for me. That quenched my thirst, and then I move on to whatever that next challenge would be." And it's just like, what are you guys talking about?
Right? That's like saying, oh, every NFL MVP after they win just retires.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, you know what? I've peaked. I can't do anything more. I'm going to retire after my MVP season.
Now, does that rule out people doing that after they win a championship? No. That's definitely like something like to consider in traditional sports. But let's be real. Like, when it comes to esports, career lifespans are extremely limited. Sinatra's still very young. And I know a lot of people are like, well, Valorant's in closed beta. This is a huge risk. That is true.
No.
But this, to me, is a clear indicator of, we've heard a lot of rumblings about teams or Overwatch League players wanting out after this season. And if the reigning MVP is the first to go, you best believe that there are going to be other ducks that follow. Whether it's going to be in the immediate future or people riding out the rest of their contract and then move in during the off season. But it's honestly just not a very good look. And, for someone that was that integral for like the championship team, that kind of just puts things under the microscope that much further at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the narrative of the, he has nothing else to prove. That's just not it. I'll flat out say this. Sinatra is probably the best player to all of a sudden retire, but that's not saying a whole lot. Because let's be real, Sinatra had 3 good stages in his Overwatch career. Truly, like, it's 3 good stages. Because stage 4, he was not really anything. He had good finals. But it's like, yeah, he did fine, but like, let's be real, it wasn't Sinatra carrying them on their back to the finals. That's just not something that was happening. But here's the thing, like you said, games have a very limited amount to play, and people talk about the risk of going to Valorant. Let's be real, there is no risk.
Well, even if there was, the risk isn't just a one-sided street, because it's also still a risk. Like, we don't know what the state of the league is going to be looking like next year, because things are constantly kind of shifting. But for me, like, if we're just talking dollars, obviously Valorant right now is getting a lot of press due to the Twitch drops and being in closed beta. It's still really early on, but this is an esports scene that is going to try to happen organically. But you can't really put like a dollar number on it as of yet.
No.
You still have a lot of, I don't want to say blind faith, but there still are a lot of expectations that are being put on by the gaming community just due to the fact that it is made by Riot. So they automatically kind of like make that connection, like, oh, this esports scene is going to blow up. Now,
well, it's not just Riot. It's So, okay, let's look at the three most popular esports out there. And let's be real, Overwatch League is not one of them.
No.
You're looking at CS, you're looking at League, and you're looking at Dota. So the makers of League made a CS game. Like, if there is such a sure thing as a popular esport, it's gonna be this. And like that's why everyone is putting together these teams, and that's, you know what, I don't think he's getting 150,000 to go play for them, but I think he's going to be very well compensated, especially since he can also actually stream now too.
Right.
And he did say that he will be streaming full time as well. So he really is left to become a full-time streamer, Valorant pro. And it's just the fact that it's another game and he's the reigning MVP, and you know, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, so you know, it did seem like the major catalyst for him was, you know, introduction of Rollock as well as move into a hero ban system. And, you know, this is something that we've been talking about, honestly, pretty much out of the gate with the hero ban system. There has been this disconnect that we have seen. And a lot of it just has to deal with the fact that the way that it was implemented kind of like fractured the player base in a lot of ways. So, as I'm sure everyone is well aware at this point, like, even if they only casually play or casually watch the Overwatch League, there's been a certain alternating pattern when it comes to the damage heroes that are getting pulled every other week. And it seems like, you know, 1 week McCree and Widowmaker are eligible to get played. And then a week after that, they're yanked. Sure, the support hero and the tank seems to be a lot more fluid, and that a part of that is just the fact that the vast majority of the tanks have been eligible to get pulled based on the parameters, based on the threshold that they put forth in regards to the hero usage at the rumor to be like top 500 and above competitive games. But you kind of like alienate these hit scan players where they really don't know who they're playing on a week to week basis. And, you know, I know a lot of people who, you know, really enjoy the game. You know, they want to play who they want to play. And for the people that like to play McCree and Widowmaker, who are very popular picks on ladder, they just feel like they're getting shat on. And it's to the point now where even like the pros have been very vocal about the situation for the DPS players out there, to the point where it's just like, well, you couldn't recommend to anyone to be playing DPS anymore. Like, how do you attract new players for that sort of role when it's essentially forcing you to play something else every other week?
Yeah, the whole hero pool thing is kind of blown up in their face. While it's great in theory, it was just horribly implemented. Because it's doing this exact thing. You're getting two different hit scan, essentially, like banned on rotating weeks. Like, and nobody likes that. It's, you know, you people are like, well, get good on all of them. Well, that's not really an option for the majority of players. And with the pros, it's definitely one of those things where you find out Sunday if you're going to play the next week, like based on hero pools. Like, that's not cool. Like, yeah, like you're just kind of screwing with the teams and the players at this point. And it's really only affecting the DPS players, not the, like you said, not so much the tanks or the supports. But yeah, it's a messed up system that just was implemented all wrong. and it's Overwatch just can't seem to do anything right at this point.
And it's a shame too, because we were interested to see like how everything would pan out when it comes to hero pools. Obviously, the goal from the dev team was they wanted hero pools to bring a very distinct look and feel to how the game was played at a competitive level. Because we were getting very stagnant when it comes to meta rotations. And then like we keep seeing like this common trend time and time again, where you would have maybe something that wouldn't necessarily affect the Overwatch League at all, or in like very minor cases. So like for instance, this week, Wrecking Ball was the tank that was pulled. We've seen a couple of like dive instances in the Overwatch League, but it's still kind of like on the lower echelon compared to like a vast majority of the other tanks. And it's primarily like on control maps or just in these dive comps. But honestly, like not as impactful there as opposed to what people were playing on ladder. That being said, though, there's more of an even curve on who's getting played on ladder, at least at that position, because we've had consecutive weeks now where when they are doing the hero pool draw on Watchpoint, which airs on Sundays, we've actually had every tank posted on like on the graph to see, okay, like who can get pulled, who's above the threshold, which is not the case for the damage dealers, because time and time again there has seemingly only been 3 heroes to choose from at that point, as opposed to the 7 that we have seen with the tanks. And for the most part, Ed, it's kind of been like, well, we've seen like these sort of trends in the Overwatch League where teams have been going towards compositions that try to scare other teams off from running select heroes. So an example of this will be, let's use like the LA Valiant and the Atlanta Reign, both of whom have been loving Ashe and Torbjorn. Which is a weird combination, but a lot of this has been done to shy people away from playing Sombra and Tracer compositions. And on the other side, like you also have a lot of teams kind of like sticking with kind of like the Snowball comp of like Mei and Reaper. But we're not really seeing things like that on ladder. Like, you're not seeing a ton of Torbjorn or Ashe. And the cases where you are seeing Ashe, it's primarily due to the fact that, well, Widowmaker and McCree are out of the rotation, and that comes to... that kind of seems to be, like, the option C out of that particular role. But it's gotten to this point now where... with the hero pool system, they are essentially pulling heroes that the community loves to play, and half of the time, it just doesn't really impact the Overwatch League. And, I know you and I have talked, at lengths about whether or not hero pools in the Overwatch League were the best thing.
Yes.
For the competitive integrity of the game, which is honestly like a whole other discussion because of the pandemic going on, teams being based in NA or in Asia, particularly Korea, and there's been a lot of moving parts on that end as well. But this disconnect that's just been happening, as someone who plays the game, you want to be able to look at the competitive side of the game and be able to mirror what you are seeing to the best of your capability on ladder. And in the current state of, the way things are, with how things have been working, it's very hard to do that as a DPS player.
Yeah. Now, one solution that I thought could actually, in theory, work, because the it's not the DPS available that make the meta. It's the tanks available that make the meta.
Mhm.
What if they banned? Because I don't think they're just going to get rid of hero bans. I don't think that's their plan. Because then they'd probably have to implement something else.
Okay.
What if they banned 2 tanks?
Well, are we talking about 2 tanks in general, or are we talking 1 main, 1 off?
No, I would say just 2 tanks in general.
Okay.
Kind of go with the same basis. So you could get, Ryan Zarya, or you could get ban Ryan Orisa, or,
Mhm.
even like the crazy Zarya Diva. That would change up the DPS meta more than um hero bans for the DPS.
Okay.
That could be an alternative to actually having actual real changes on a weekly basis. Instead of just rotating, because just some weeks you might have to play Tracer Sombra, or the week after you might have to play Pharah, or you know what I mean, based on the tanks, not based on the DPS heroes available.
Mhm.
So I that's just one thing. I hope they drastically overhaul it. Again, I do not think that they're going to switch over to the letting us pick the hero, like the players, like the
Mhm.
because that is in itself a very flawed system
Right.
for the pro scene and even regular ladder. It's because basically it's like who gets to decide.
Well, I
Like
do, because this arbitrary number means I'm better than you.
exactly like that's just the easiest way to add 10 times more toxicity to the game
Mhm.
where it doesn't need that. So there's going to be a fine line of them tweaking it. And do I think they're going to tweak it? Nope.
That's
That's the thing. I don't expect changes before Overwatch 2.
Mhm.
Like I just don't.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like we look back and the dev team wasn't afraid to like make tweaks, but this was before they streamlined the entire process. We basically went from a week where it was 1 tank, 1 support, 2 damage heroes, 2 ban like 3 damage heroes. Then I targeted hit scan players, and which ended up just being the case every other week anyway. But like that kind of turned into a meme in itself. And then they upped the count in regards to overall number of heroes that they would pull, whether it was just based on what role they were or just the number in itself entirely. And then they streamlined the process where it would match between Overwatch League, Path to Pro, as well as what players are playing on the ladder. Because even before that, before they streamlined the process, it was really weird because like you would have the league, and then like on Thursdays they would roll out what the hero pool was, and obviously with at the time what was the introduction of the home and away model for the Overwatch League. They were already working on a limited schedule in regards to what they could practice for that week set of games. So they were already in crunch time, and then they were adding like this other element of chaos, and it's definitely been a heavy burden, especially like on the coaches. Like there's been a very drastic, like turnover when it comes to coaching staffs out there, and we've seen a number of departures on that end already. Maybe some of which are based off of how a team is doing, because like Uprising aren't doing too well. They did just lose an assistant coach this past week in Ilka, which, I get it. You want to ship out of Boston because they're not doing so hot, and, they kind of have I don't know if I would say they have a bad omen about them, but, bad things just seem to happen to Boston more than any other team. For whatever reason.
He who must not be named part one in due.
Yeah, essentially. But, like, if I'm being honest, like, with hero pools, like, I like the idea of hero pools. I still do. But the fact that there's been a constant disconnect since the earliest implementation doesn't necessarily give me a ton of confidence in the direction that they could go. Now, if it were up to me, let's say they do decide to add like a second take. Maybe we just only end up banning one damage hero at that point. Or if they decide to keep damage at 2, just make it where you can't ban the same hero more than once a month, or have like some diminishing return when it comes to the chance of it getting pulled. That way we're not seeing a situation where it's happening time and time again, where, let's say, McCree is banned for essentially 3/4 of a competitive season.
Well, so here's the thing, is if they switch it to 2 weeks instead of 1, then you're on the they can only be banned once a month train.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, by default, you would have that.
True.
And I think a lot of people, I think that they should go to a once every 2 weeks system, just to allow teams to actually practice who they're going to be playing. And then you throw in these stupid, like, mid-season tournament, which I'm almost positive we'll be going through.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, well, there's going to be no hero bans for that. Why? Like, why? I don't get it. You're just, everyone's in it. Everyone would be on the same foot if you had hero bans. So why not have them?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I know initially when the mid-season tournament was planned, before they brought it back, the playoffs and like the tournament format never were tied to hero pools. But, it also leads to the question, like, well, what's going to happen with hero pools on ladder for that month?
Yeah, because we'll still have hero pools just for ladder, and that's it. And the rest of us basically, get to play with that, while the pros get to play whatever the hell they want for some reason.
Yeah, which isn't a great feeling if you were someone that is playing on ladder.
Right?
Now that being said, though, it is worth noting that when it comes to how the season has kind of played out for the Overwatch League, I mean, you can't really deny the fact that there have been a number of games, this first half of the stretch, that haven't really had too much of a meaning. So by having this mid-season tournament, there's honestly, something on the line. So, maybe that could spark a little bit of interest in regards to pulling more viewers in, which in itself has been a hard task, whether it's just due to the fact that, Overwatch League is broadcasted on YouTube, whether it's the fact that we still don't have any sort of drops for Overwatch League tokens, teams being based in different regions, so you're kind of splitting the viewership in that regard too. A lot of different things to kind of like factor in there. But with this tournament, they are having the 20 teams competed in the first 3 weeks of May. They'll have like some qualifier matches, so on the NA side, you'll have 3 matches per team. The Asia teams will have 4 matches. And, there is prize money on the line here. $225,000 is up for grabs, being awarded to the top 4 teams. And then they actually made it where, like, you get, like, a set amount of money per tournament win as well for the matches, which is pretty cool, because, like, even if, you don't have the greatest run, you're still able to bring home at least a little bit of cash, as opposed to just being like, oh, better luck next time. But there's this really interesting thing about this where, you look at the NA side and you look at the Asia side and you're like, hold on, like, one of these sides is like twice the size of the other region because you have 13 teams that are based in North America, which does include the Vancouver Titans. um, which, there's been a lot of talk about the Titans kind of getting slapped in 2 matches into Asia and then, tucking their tail in between their legs and then scurrying back to North America for easy wins. Based off of, Sinatra, or based on Super like trolling, the Titans and how, he just respects that, but you look at that and you're like, well, if you're a Chinese team or if you're one of these Korean teams, man, like you got a pretty good shot at getting top 4 within a pretty good amount of money. But really the big takeaway here is when we talk about the matches, at least the NA side of the tournament, we are going to shy away from like the coast matches. So like we're not only gonna be seeing like the Shockface and the Valiant and the Gladiators. There was some like server side update in regards to the lobbies for the NA side, so we're at least gonna be getting some fresh matches, and I know I'm excited about that primarily just because like it seems like we've been getting a lot of duplicate matches lately. It's honestly kind of been back-to-back weeks as well, so I'm looking forward to it. But it does kind of like lead into the question of the overall state of competitive integrity in the Overwatch League due to the aforementioned pandemic, due to server stability when it comes to geolocation, a lot of stuff to kind of like unfold in that regard. But if we are just talking about the Overwatch League format, how do you feel about a tournament ran system as opposed to, say, the current league structure? Because a lot of people are looking at CDL, which is also home series based, but obviously it's online now, also due to the pandemic. But you're not just playing for wins as a primary factor. It's all point based. So, if you are like top 3 or top 4, you net a certain amount of points towards the stand-ins, and then that is basically like the deciding factor of where you are in the stand-ins. So do you like that structure where it's like more going back to say like the grassroots of Overwatch when we would have like these monthly tournaments, or do you want to see them like continuing to kind of like draw out like this season process that we have been getting?
So I don't hate the process of this if it's announced. The problem I have is actually with announcing it a few weeks beforehand and then being like, yeah, no, this is the thing now.
Right.
This is what it is. Just deal with it. And they're just kind of springing this stuff on people. And I don't like that. I don't like changing the format of the structure of the league and the structure of the playoffs and how people can do in the playoffs. Changing that mid-season. That I have a big problem with. As far as like how it's actually done, I don't hate this idea of a big tournament. I don't get why they need to include standings, like boost to standings for this. Just have a tournament,
right,
with everyone, and everyone would be super happy. Like nobody's complaining that there's an actual tournament going on. In fact, people are happy. It's the only negativity around this is the fact that you sprung a change on how people can make the playoffs mid-season. Like that was not intended. Like that's not how it should be. And here is, Overwatch coming in and another sign of, they they have the right idea and they have the right way to try something, and they just implement it so incredibly wrong and screw it all up.
Well, it is worth mentioning that when it comes to the reasoning behind there being like a fixed number bonus towards a win, is the players and the teams wanted incentive. I guess cash wasn't enough for them.
Yeah, like, okay, what more incentive do you want than if you do well, you get money?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's pretty good incentive.
Right.
Like, that's usually what incentivizes me to work is money. So you want more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Shut up. Like, it's just a horrible way of implementing things.
Yeah, like I love tournaments. But there's been this ongoing feud between like traditional sports and esports about the way that they're running things, and when you just factor in these matches counting towards the overall season standings in a season that I don't want to say is like on the wayside, but one where the competitive integrity is already called into question, like adding this new element in regards to like a format midway through the season doesn't offset things because it was already kind of like at that point. So I will say, like, moving forward, I would not be surprised if the Overwatch League decides to mirror what they are doing in CDL to go that full tournament based weekend. And in that case, like, we wouldn't have as big of a lull period when it comes to when we would see a team on stage or online again. Whereas, this season, there's been a lot of moments where, due to the pandemic and everything, you've had teams wanting to get out of North America. Well, then they, change their base of operations. They fly out to South Korea. They got to self-quarantine for a 2-week period. And then they're not able to play, and there have been times this season where we just haven't seen a team compete for an 8-week stretch.
God, when's the last time we've seen London play?
It's
It's
it's been a while.
It's probably been 8 to 10 weeks, somewhere in that range.
Let me look it up really quick. The last game was week 4.
So 8 weeks. Because they're not playing this week.
Yeah, they play week 14.
So we will go 10 weeks without seeing the Spitfire play. Who the hell is making your schedule?
Yeah, it's rough.
Like, because they're already in Korea. Mm-hmm. They were over there with, like, when Seoul and Vancouver went. So they're playing all the time. Why is London not playing all the time?
Well, you see, Ed, that's because London doesn't want to be in the league, as has been rumored. I'm not going to say that's the reasoning, but it is really weird.
What? I have not heard this. London basically wants to GTFO out of the league?
Yeah, that's been circulating for a while. That being said, though, I don't know if that's the reason. I don't know if there's something else going on. I'm trying to remember, like, if there was a credible source for the rumor or not.
I mean, it wouldn't be surprising.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of teams don't want to get the hell out. Like, I mean, I could see a team like the Valiant wanting to get the hell out. I could see Boston. Maybe not Boston. Florida, probably a team that would want to get out. So I don't know. It's all depends on how long their contracts are.
Right. Now, it is worth noting as well, when it comes to the overall health of the Overwatch League, obviously we need to be able to move talent along, or talent like up the pole, in regards to player progression when it comes to the whole path to pro process. And like it seems like every month we are having to light a candle or pour another one out for the boys in regards to like an academy team deciding to fold. Now, this was happening even before the pandemic, where a lot of teams were finding it hard to make money, which is understandable because even some of the teams that were winning seasons weren't profitable.
No.
So like even this past week, like we saw Team Envy, who had been one of the more stable path to pro teams since inception, honestly, which is the academy team for the Dallas Fuel, have dropped out of contenders. So their players are not free agents, so that includes players like Afox, Onigod, OG, Kevster, Finzi, just to name a few. And it's crazy to think at this point in time, Ed. There is only one remaining academy roster based in North America. And that is Uprising Academy as the sole US representation for academies. And the fact that Boston, of all teams, is the last one standing is honestly, I don't know if, like, that should feel like a major accomplishment by them. But it's just like, how much longer are they going to hold on at that point if there's just not really too much left there?
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where you're just like, how is Boston the only one around? Like, are they really selling their players for that much? Because Lord knows how much they actually are paying their players. But yeah, I'm shocked that they're still there. But I mean, we've been saying it for weeks. Tier 2 Overwatch is dead. It just is. Get over it. It could have been something great, but this is going to be the theme of this show. It was a great idea. Blizzard just fucked it up. Like, Blizzard dropped the ball on it.
Which is why, and like honestly, like if we're talking format structures, like if there's ever a time to reboot, now is the time to do it, leading into like the next season. Go back to the tournament structure. I mean, I would say advertise, but that is a delusion of grandeur. I'm not gonna rely on that. But
and that's one of the things is like, if they just advertised, they saw what happened when they do advertise.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when they advertised Australian contenders?
Yeah, which was
on the launcher,
embedded.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they had like 8,000 viewers, which is like the record for a contender stream at the time. And you're just like, wait, what now? Like, did that just happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then we never saw the advertising again. You're just like, oh, come on. Just freaking, just freaking advertise. That's all you had to do was advertise this stuff. And it would have been way more popular. But nope, we're just not going to touch it. And that's the death of it. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sadly.
Yeah, it's rather unfortunate. Just a lot of missed opportunity in that regard. But Uprising aren't the only survivor so so far. At least like across the globe. I mean, there are a couple of other teams that are still standing. Like you got British Hurricane, based out of Europe, which is the London Spitfire Academy team. You got Team CC, which is the Dragons Academy team. Billy Gaming, also based in China, which is, I want to say, the Hangzhou team. And then you got Genji Esports in Korea, which is the Dynasty Academy team. But it's just, when we're talking about Envy, this has been one of the more successful organizations in Contenders North America. That's probably been more true for a little bit over a year at this point, seeing as they had just won both Contender seasons this past year. They had a second place finish in the Atlanta Showdown. But unfortunately, in a gauntlet, they kind of fell short and they got eliminated before even reaching the top 6 when it came to the inter-regional competition. But we're at a time now where obviously there's this new carrot getting dangled in front of people, with Valorant being in closed beta. So we are going to see a turnover here. Anyone who is thinking otherwise is definitely trying to fool themselves. And this wouldn't be the first time we've seen this happen. It happened in a lesser extent, yeah. When Apex initially came out, we saw a ton of Overwatch players making the transition over. It might not have been anyone at the popularity or significance of someone like a Sinatra, by league standards, but it did happen. But at this point, it's just well, there's a lot more that we could have seen from the Path to Pro, whether it was, I don't know, paying teams on time, which was another big thing, or having more of an infrastructure for the teams, more support from the league, as opposed to just kind of I'm trying to think how I should phrase this. It kind of felt more inmates run the asylum at times, where, everyone's just kind of keeping to themselves, kind of doing their own thing, and just kind of making things up as they go along. Which in itself, might be a little cutthroat. And, at this point, just looking at the turnover of academy teams, it's definitely been more nails in the coffin at this point. So I don't know what the solution is going to be. Maybe Blizzard needs to go back to actually licensing tournaments and then not just holding all of the cards. Because that was the other thing too, where, we went from having these very high production tournaments, with OGN, who did Apex before Apex got turned into Contenders Korea. We would see these monthly melees. We had Alien, where you had the Take TV stuff over in Europe. You had tournaments that would basically crowdsource prize money for the players, which was always great to see, whether it was with Matcherino or similar companies. And then we've even seen people like Vita Ramen stepping in and putting up some pretty big prize pools for the tournaments that they've ran. And it comes to show the community does care. They are more than willing to put the money into these tournaments. But we just need to have more control over it, as opposed to just saying Blizzard kind of just keeping things for themselves, where at this point it's just well, it's either run by us or there's no scene. And, it's pretty clear, the scene is not going to be able to withstand, that sort of treatment. at any like lengthy period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just flat out just didn't allow Tier 2 to thrive. Like you said, that we used to have all these little mini tournaments that were crowdsourced, and that went by the wayside. One thing that they could have done that would have been great for Tier 2, allow them to stream like their own personal point of view. Like have individual players stream. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy, but like that's a way for them to earn money.
Right.
You know, like while playing instead of, you know, the Blizzard Bucks China contenders was getting, or whatever contenders was getting that. So yeah, like it is definitely one of those, they implemented it, they thought it could sustain itself, and they were wrong. And they basically thought it could sustain itself by cutting off its knees as well. Like not letting them do anything to try and further it themselves outside of just their gameplay. Which is not gonna, let's be real, your gameplay is not gonna grow your title, your tier 2 seat. It's just not. So yeah, it's sad, but open division is more intriguing to me than tier 2. Because there you get some wonky fun teams and stuff like that.
Or you get Ramses.
So
that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. But you know, if we're talking about ways to support Path to Pro, you know, let's bring up something that happened here very recently. You know, even a couple of weeks ago, right? Where all of a sudden, you know, you'd log in, you'd go to, you know, the skins. I never contender skins in game. And I remember, you know, when we talked about this, or like, you've got to be effing kidding me. You know, it was very similar to when they accidentally reset skill rating when Choi Hyobin became Golden Boy Choi after he did his placements, and it's just like, you hate to see it because it essentially shows that there could have been something done that there was a demand for, right? And it wasn't. So I don't know. It feels right now that it's just one gut punch after another. And we're at this point now where obviously a lot of the attention from the development team is looking at the future of the game. And by the future of the game, I mean Overwatch 2. I'm not talking about the current state of Overwatch. We're looking ahead to the sequel, the PvE expansion, whatever the hell you want to label it, because that was another thing that, you know, the team was honestly struggling with. So we know we're getting like snippets here and there. There was a dev update which you and I were just kind of like rolling our eyes at. And they were talking about like the communication wheel and adding like callouts and things like that. You know, I mean, like that's okay. Like, it's not what we were hoping for, because you know we discussed at length like what we'd want to see from a PAIN system, because that is something that they had been talking about doing for a while. Wasn't what they talked about, so now we're just like, well, maybe Overwatch 2? I don't know, but it was one of those things where when I saw that, I was like, you know, okay, like, sure, you get a couple more call-outs. I don't know how well that's going to work on console. Like, that's a big concern for me. Like, how easy will that actually be able to access for them? But on the other hand, it's also like, well, it's given the voice actor some work. So, I mean, that is a positive, because who knows, like, how much remote work they are doing at this point in time. But it was just, like, one of those things where it's just, like, we were hoping for a little bit more, but it's just quality of life, essentially, improvement. It's not necessarily, like, a new feature, so to speak.
Yeah, I was disappointed. To say the least. Like when they all right, so talking about the in-game skins. Come on. That's like 2 years too late.
Right.
That could have been a great way to kind of fund some of the tier 2 scene.
Yeah. And,
Um
it's there's an obvious reason why they can never do team-based contender skins.
no. And I don't think that was not something I ever thought that was
Right.
actually feasible.
It would never, because of the turnaround.
But this is something that they could have stuck in the game and actually, generated sales for themselves, while also, because like this is a way of crowdsourcing tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you say, hey, all these sales will go towards this season of contenders, and you just be like, okay, yeah, let's all buy it, and then they come up with a new skin the next season, or something along that lines to continuously do it, that literally costs them nothing except designing a new skin in game.
Right.
And if anyone here tells me that it's hard for them to do so, no.
I mean, they're still releasing skins despite a lot of attention being put on the expansion.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was so stupid. And the fact that they just immediately took it out of the game, I'm like, come on. Like it's legit in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, nah, we'll take it out of the game.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where it's like, I've already seen your hand in the cookie jar, and like they're already caught. Like, just because you slowly try to like pull it out doesn't mean like we didn't actually see you.
Not even slowly trying to pull out your hand out of the cookie jar. You legit bit off part of the cookie.
Right.
And you're just like, I'm gonna slowly put this one back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it is. God. Again, great idea, implemented poorly. Running theme here. Running theme.
Yeah, so and that I will mention, and it's important to note, they recently were like trying to incentivize people to join the Overwatch League mailing list with 100 tokens. Congrats, you guys can get $5 worth of one skin. But if you are on the mailing list for the Overwatch League earlier, I can't remember if it was on Sunday or Monday, but they sent out emails for surveys. Where they're trying to gauge with the customers in regards to like what their thoughts are with the formats, everything kind of like getting incorporated over the course of the season. And the survey in itself takes about 10 minutes to do. So they are trying to at least see what the community response is right now, because right now there have been so many changes, with how our lives have been impacted by the pandemic, to how the league has definitely kind of suffered at the hands of that, which in itself, like, is not really to blame on the league, but like it definitely hasn't helped them in what would be seen by a lot of people as like a very pivotal year. Since this was the home and away model introduction, but they're trying to gain feedback so they can make for a better product.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a development team, and an esports league who has not shied away from making changes. Now, that's not to say that changes haven't happened infrequently or out of the blue, or, just we're going to try something and see if it works. It's been all over the road in that regard. But at least seeing this, it does leave that glimmer of hope, knowing that, they are listening. Like, I know there are, times where it doesn't feel like that, but, Cap, like our dev and savior, Papa Jeffrey Cap praise him. He's been very active during the pandemic on, the Overwatch forums, providing feedback, trying to at least be transparent to some degrees. So, if we're looking to better improve the experience, whether it is within the game, whether it is for, the future of Overwatch with Overwatch 2, or just improving the esports ecosystem, or trying to heighten the competitive integrity of the Overwatch League by having an actual format that sticks throughout the entirety of the season, as opposed to something that changes right in the middle, for whatever reason, like, now is the time to put this stuff out there so we can make the necessary changes and take the necessary steps to improve the quality for everyone. So I highly recommend, if you guys are on the Overwatch League mailing list, take the time, fill out the survey, get it sent in, because, obviously a lot of us are very passionate about, the game, its competitive scene, and, right now, and, it really feels like we're just getting jerked in so many different directions that we're kind of, like, losing sight of some of the problems that we're seeing that have become, like, more and more apparent over, the course of the season at this point.
Yeah, and I'll just add this with the survey thing, because I've filled it out. Like, it costs nothing. It's not. It's obviously not as important as voting. Let's just get that out there.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's the same philosophy. Is if you lose the right to bitch about it if you don't actually put in an input for it.
Right.
Like, if you have this chance to put in your input and you don't, you lose the right to bitch and moan about it. You do. Because the thing is you had a chance to go up there and actually let them hear how you feel, and you chose not to. So you're just going to be the Reddit hero that will just bitch about it and then hope miraculously, like, it gets fixed by someone else. So don't just go fill out the GD form. It's all I ask. And you get 100 tokens out of it. Like, it's not like it's a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
You get 100 coins, you get a skin out of it, and so
Right.
That's my 2 cents for all of that.
Yeah, so I was trying to think, like, if there's any other, like, notable things in regards to just, like, general happenings over, the past week. We hit, like, the major, like, some of the more major points, for sure.
Like, we didn't really go over what the new communication wheel is, because the new communication wheel is not worth going over. It really isn't. Like, they added some new voice lines to the game.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
For
That's
32
the new
Heroes.
Communication wheel. Yeah. That is the new communication.
I guess if
you
we're...
can now say sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, for the people that want to troll in game, you can now say sorry on all 32 heroes. Congrats.
So, yeah. That's really it. They did a whole developer update on that.
Yeah, it's essentially more customization for the wheel.
Yeah.
And That is
which
everything in a nutshell.
100% did not need to actually have a developer update for.
Probably not.
We talked about last week. We talked about the experimental changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of all is one big blur.
You know, that kind of
So,
happens
you
during
know
a
what I mean?
pandemic where, like, you know, like I'm trying to keep a sleep schedule, and then, you know, my body's just like, no. And then it's just like, I'm also trying to, like, maintain a podcast schedule, and then things happen, and then that doesn't happen. And then it's just like, well, shit. You know, it's hard to remember what day it is sometimes. You know, everything just blends together, and, you know, we're not the only ones dealing with that. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have also had that experience where, you know, let's say, you know, you're out of a job, like there's probably more than one day out of the week where you don't even know what day it is or what time it is at any point in time. Who knows? But that's basically the major news that we had this week. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that we talked about kind of like coincides between one another. And it's been stuff that's kind of been brewing for a while. Now, I don't want to say like, you know, like we're losing our love for the game or the computer scene or anything like that. You know, I know, you know, we can vent quite a bit, more so today as opposed to, you know, some of the other episodes. But it's really just a culmination of the parts. And we're only vocal because, you know, we want to see the game succeed, and we want to see them kind of like right the ship, turn the tide, whatever terminology you want to use. Because like I'm always the type of person who, when it comes to something failing, I don't want to have like a bullshit excuse over why it happened. I want to put the blame on myself if it's from me. I don't want to have like an outside factor be what like undoes would undo any like everything, you know, at that point. So
Yeah. I mean, don't take our bitching as like we hate the game or anything like that. We still enjoy it. I still enjoy watching it. I have not played it as much, but sometimes you just need to take like small breaks from games. I mean, like, perfect example is I logged back into World of Warcraft for the first time in like 5 months, and it was a nice break. You know what I mean? And then you feel reinvigorated, and that's how I am with Overwatch and playing. Like, soon I'm gonna get the bug to be like, I want to go play Apex or play Overwatch, and yeah, you know, and then I'll stop playing Apex for all the time. Doesn't mean I hate Apex. It just means I'm going through like a mode of what game I want to play. Really. Um. So yeah, like we may complain, but we still love the game. So I don't think we're going anywhere because we're not. Although fantasy Overwatch is pretty much dead too.
that's a whole other can of worms. Which you could also talk about in the surveys that you fill out. So, you know, tell them, hey, you know, there's been a lot of community I don't know if I should say a lot of community interest. There is a niche of the community that wants fantasy esports.
If they implemented it themselves,
right,
it would be massive.
right.
But they have to implement it themselves. It can't be through like secondary, because like the only way you find out about fantasy Overwatch now is if you specifically go out and search for it. And most people won't do that.
Right.
But if you're just watching and, you know, they have, you know, they have like Overwatch League Fantasy, and it's a segment, and it's on their website and stuff like that. Oh, that would be gigantic.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying how much fantasy sports help the NFL. All right, so I think with that being said, Ed, like we should probably close things out at this point. So apologies for not doing a Overwatch League preview. But just as a quick reminder, hero bans for the week in Overwatch League on ladder: Wrecking Ball, Mercy, Widowmaker, McCree. Echo is eligible to get played in the Overwatch League this weekend.
Do you think she will?
You know what? I think just because Echo is new, people will force to play it, even if they don't think it's optimal if Mercy is out of the rotation. I think they'll try to make it work. Anyway. Now, will it be in every team thing? Probably not. But, people like new themes, Ed.
Okay.
Whether it's new ways to piss people off, like, tilting the gladiators by running, Ashe Torbjorn. Or, similar things like that. But it'll be an interesting week. I'm really anxious to see what impact, if any, Echo has right out of the gate, or if it's going to be more in line with what we saw out of Anna, where we don't see the hero for a couple of months, and then all of a sudden she proves to be pretty pivotal. So, with that being said, guys, if you guys want to help us out, please head on over to iTunes and write us a review. We're always looking for insight on how we can make for a better listening experience for you. We also have ways to find additional Overwatch-related content, which, by the way, Ed, I know I posted this in our Discord earlier, but there's another Path to Pro podcast that is coming up. I think it's this week, even, by over.gg. And when I saw this, I was like, my initial reaction is like, oh, great, so we're going to have more Path to Pro podcasts in actual NA Academy teams.
That is sad.
Yeah,
that is just sad.
So for those keeping track, there is one NA Academy team left, which is what we mentioned earlier, that being Uprising Academy. There are two, or going to be at this point, two Path to Pro podcasts dedicated to Path to Pro. So what a day to be alive. But you can find additional Overwatch League, Path to Pro content over on our website with Overwatch Recall. And then typically on Sundays we do the weekly recall, which I got up earlier this afternoon, finally. Obviously I've been a little distracted. But we release the episodic listen of basically that entire week's worth of Overwatch podcast content. So if you want to keep up to date with that, bookmark the directory on our website at owlnshow.com/owrecall. And then you can find Overwatch Recall on Twitter, which is where you'll typically see me advertising the weekly recall at owrecall. So outside of that, if you guys want to support us directly, you can do so via our Patreon, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. You can find more info at patreon.com/OWLnetwork, where you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons, Daniel, Owl, Kesha, Agent Life, and 044 in helping our network grow. So we appreciate all of the direct support, whether it is via Patreon, Twitch bits, subscriptions there, Twitch Prime, all of that good stuff. It all goes towards, keeping the lights on and podcast hosting, all of that good stuff. So Ed, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know how they can contact both the show and ourselves.
Okay, so you can reach us through email at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. We are on Twitter at hndoverwatch. We do have a website, and that's www.owlnshow.com. We do have a YouTube, and that's youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We are on... Okay, I have to fix this in our notes.
What?
Because it's been saying this for like a few weeks now. It's not Discord. It's Discord. Discord is discord.me/OWLNshow. We are on Twitch, twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We are a Twitch affiliate, so help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon with that amazing Amazon Prime. So our podcast network does stream pretty regularly. That's Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. We have the Overwatch League Network. Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have OWL by the Numbers. On Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, we have this show, Heroes Never Die. And then on Thursday, we have Tavern Tales, Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast that Totem and I do. And that's Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/TavernTalesHS. So you can contact me personally on Twitter at Edinar83, or you can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Edinar. Totem, where can they find you at?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR. When I'm streaming on Twitch, it is at twitch.tv/TotallyDrunk. And I'll probably be streaming a fair amount tomorrow. Probably Hearthstone Battlegrounds, because, Thursdays kind of like our Hearthstone day.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Gotta see if I can maintain 6K plus if I'm going through a long session of Battlegrounds, or if that's gonna be a nail in the coffin. I don't know. We'll wait and see. But I do want to thank you guys again for joining us tonight on another episode of Heroes Never Die. This has been episode number 208. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by my co-host Edinar. And please, for the love that is all unholy, go fill out the GD survey.
Yes.
Let your voice be heard so we could secure the betterment of the future of the game as well as the competitive scene. And we'll see you guys back next week. Have a good night.
See ya.